out when I can. I thought it was a very interesting story that the group would find um, at least intriguing to hear about, and hopefully something that will touch our hearts, and we can figure out a way to help out, even if it's a small way, something that we can do. And I know she'd appreciate prayers and best wishes and all of those things. So, um, I'm going to, with that, turn the program over to you, Sue. Okay.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm going to just tell you right off the bat that I've written out my remarks. There's so much that I want to say, and it's such a hugely complex issue that you'll see me looking down to remember everything that I want to try to distill into just a few minutes here today. Mitch is right. We've known each other a long time. Actually, when I was in high school at Rittner, and my dad was the pastor at OBC, I would take off during the middle of the day and run down to the funeral home and sing for a funeral, and then run back up to classes. So that's when I first met Mitch. But my kids both attended Rittner schools, and my mom still lives in the same house in Overland, so our roots go way back. Um, right up until last night, we were hoping that Angela could be here for the meeting today, but it just didn't work out. I am wearing her Rotary Club jacket. She was a Rotary Exchange student from 1999 to 2000, that academic year. She was in Lyon, France. And she learned an awful lot from that experience. And she likes to say they taught her adapt, adapt, adapt as being the three rules of success in that endeavor. And so we adapted. That lesson has stood her well in her journey with mold avoidance, because you can't just have one plan. You got to have several backup plans. And today I'm the backup plan. She has been staying in a northern state that has been relatively free of mold, and also escaped a lot of the toxins from the fires of this summer and fall. But she found her car covered with 6 inches of snow one morning recently, and temperatures down in the teens. And so uh, found a hotel that she could tolerate fairly well. But after 2 nights in that room, her symptoms were so bad that she just barely made it out. And so now she's back in her car near a fishing hole, looking at the icy river, and out of cell and internet connectivity. So she won't be with us today. But I'll do the best that I can, as I said, to distill a hugely complex issue into digestible bites for you. I don't know if you are aware of toxic mold illness, or if you know anyone who has it, or if you've ever heard anything about it. I certainly hadn't heard anything about it until a couple of years ago when she first started telling me about this. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a science researcher, I'm a mom. And fortunately, I've been able to follow my daughter on this journey and educate myself. And I have found growing numbers of published articles and discussions about mold and what it's doing to people and what it's been doing to people for decades. And so there is information out there, and we'll talk about how to educate yourself if you're interested in following more of that later on. Some people who are exposed to toxic mold are able to get out of it quickly. If they detect that that's the issue, that's fine. They get rid of it, they remediate, they move, whatever it takes, and they're okay. They just go on with their lives. Other people, like my daughter Angela, who has prolonged exposure, we think for at least 20 years, the last 20 years, she's been living in very high mold areas and buildings. One of them here in South St. Louis actually had mushrooms growing in the carpet, and the landlord said, "Oh, don't worry about that." Things like that. It takes them a lot longer to heal. First, they have to identify the problem, and then they have to start addressing it. So by that time, a lot of other health conditions have arisen in their bodies as a result of this mold. So I referred to the ISEAI, that's the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness. It's a relatively new international organization. They have a huge web presence. They estimate that millions of people in the USA become sick from exposure to black mold and other toxins in homes and buildings every year. That's millions every year. This international group of doctors and researchers uses the word epidemic when they describe the statistical rise in numbers of people suffering from mold illness and related conditions. And here's just a few of those exacerbating situations. Top of the list is mold and other toxins present in buildings that have been damaged by water through flooding, roof leaks, plumbing leaks, etc. Infections such as Lyme disease, asbestos, lead, fiberglass, and other toxic substances found in many buildings. Formaldehyde, flame retardants, toxic chemicals often present in drywall, carpeting, flooring products, OSB board, insulation, glues, sealants, and other products used to build homes and offices, and other toxic chemicals that are found in mattresses, upholstered furniture, clothing, and other products. And these are largely unregulated chemicals in our environment. Pesticides used in fertilizers and methane from animal waste used in fertilizers. Pesticides, hormones, mycotoxins, arsenic, and other irritants found in produce, grain, meat, fish, and other foods. Smoke from forest fires, campfires, cigarettes, etc. Phthalates and parabens found in cosmetics and personal care products, perfumes, colognes, hairsprays, and so forth. So the list just goes on and on. That's a partial list. And I'm here to tell you, my daughter reacts to every single one of those things on that list. And this is partly due to the fact that it's just genetic within her. She's made that way. And then exacerbated by the fact that she's been dealing with this and didn't know it for so many years. Mold is something you can't always see. Some mold is not banned, but it's well known that Stachybotrys chartarum, that's the same black mold that may be lurking in your neighbor's basement, is used in biowarfare. It was used on our men in Iraq. Its effects are neurological, and they set up a chain of systemic events in the body that some people, like my Angela, cannot fight off. So while the specialists that she saw for 10 years did find things to treat within their specialty, and they were absolutely medical issues, they just didn't find the underlying cause. And this is one reason why people die from toxic mold illness. It's never identified as being the root source of a cascade of body function shutdowns. I watched my daughter suffer one major health setback after another for a good 10 years. She went from one medical specialist to another, spending money she didn't have on tests and treatments. She was an award-winning writer, was highly sought after by potential clients for her business coaching, but she was gradually unable to keep up with her work. Her personal life was suffering. Instead of getting better, she was getting worse until one day she told me that she figured out that all of the health problems were coming from mold. She was doing extensive research and learned that people with prolonged exposure to toxic mold were able to heal by taking the necessary steps to live in a perpetual state of mold avoidance. In fact, there were hundreds of thousands of people she was connecting with via private social network communities who had the very same symptoms she did, who had spent the same time and money on the same tests and treatments, who finally discovered they were suffering from mold. And sometimes this was a diagnosis from an MD. And that MD was telling them, get out of the mold. And when they did, they were getting better. One of these is a young man, Brian Rosner, who for 7 years was bedbound. Now he's climbing mountains again. So according to the ISEAI, chronic exposure to harmful environmental toxins and other triggers interferes with the normal functions of your body. They can even affect your mind. And we have found that since black mold is a neurological target, that is the first place that it goes. For a writer like Angela, that's just a kiss of death. The first thing that goes is her ability to speak. It is not uncommon for children or adults with recurring exposures to moldy indoor environments at home, work, or school to develop multiple symptoms. Some of these symptoms include, and I'll just give you a brief list of the some list. brain fog, memory problems, loss of mental sharpness, trouble organizing tasks or getting things done, headaches, light, sound, touch sensitivity, neuropathy, numbness, tingling, loss of coordination, paralysis, seizures, fainting, dizziness or lightheadedness, vertigo, insomnia, poor sleep, sleep apnea, anxiety, depression, irritability, emotional outbursts. I'd add to that rage, mood swings, suicide, fatigue, problems recovering from exercise or even daily activities, muscle weakness, cramping and aching, low blood pressure, elevated blood pressure, heart palpitations, fast heart rate, frequent respiratory infections, wheezing, allergy symptoms, shortness of breath, air hunger, swelling of lips and face, nosebleeds. I mean, the list goes on. And I'm going to just tell you this. My daughter has them all, and she doesn't just have one a day. This is how bad it is. It's horrifying. It's a living nightmare. So you can imagine after 10 years of tests and treatments and tests and treatments, when somebody threw out the idea of just getting out of the mold, we jumped at it. Absolutely jumped at it. So it may sound crazy to you, but the fact is that people suffering from environmental exposure, specifically mold, suffer from an astonishingly wide range of severe symptoms. In fact, the fact that the list is so long understates the devastating consequences of mold toxicity. And this doesn't even get into how it affects your respiratory system, your heart, your lymph nodes. I mean, every system of your body is affected by this. So, whether you have arrhythmia and heart palpitations and a resting heart rate of 220 beats per minute because of this condition or another condition, it's still affecting your heart. We both had this idea when she told me about mold avoidance, that Angela would drive off into the desert with a tent and her laptop and sit on a sand dune somewhere and keep working with her online business. And in a few months, she'd heal and she'd be back in St. Louis. Well, this shows you how little we knew about mold and what a stranglehold it had on her life. She's been gone 15 months. So, healing to long-term exposure to mold is costly. She hasn't been able to work in 15 months, and it takes a lot of time and patience. Some people, like I said, identify mold early enough to manage their reactions by simply taking frequent sabbaticals from their living environment or moving to a different home or a different geography. They can start over in a healthier location. But others, like my daughter, are just not that lucky. Depending on a lot of unpredictable factors and the person's willingness to be consistent in their mold avoidance, this can take years of moving from place to place, detoxing, decontaminating, and moving again when they begin to react to their surroundings. Angela's always toughed through it. She's one of those young girls and women who just push through. And so that's been helpful in this case because she's in it. She's in it for the long haul. The good news is that the crazy life of homelessness, constantly searching for clear air, is working. Within weeks of my daughter leaving everything behind, home, career, possessions, family, friends, pets, everything, she was already seeing positive changes. It was that fast. It's not easy, but it is the only sure path toward healing for her and others like her. For Angela and others like her, there's no homeowner's insurance to cover their losses. There's no safety net, no national organization or health plan that helps people like Angela. Toxic mold illness is not recognized by the medical community as an illness. And despite the fact that this has been a known and growing condition for decades, most people have never heard of toxic mold illness. I certainly never had. There was more skepticism than sympathy from people that my daughter told about her situation. Most people just rolled their eyes and said, oh yeah, it's in your head. People like Angela face a lonely existence, separated from social interaction that they're used to. And worse, they watch family and friends drop away because they don't know how to cope with what's happening. I've read far too many stories of people like Angela whose own families refuse to believe or support them. Some of them give up in the face of such hopelessness and commit suicide. in the social networks, the private social networks that these people are a part of. They post a blue rose when someone commits suicide. And that blue rose has been up there for months now. I don't see it coming down. Even with my financial support and cheering her on, Angela is the one who's been doing the heavy lifting, being out there alone, taking care of herself under the worst of conditions. She inspires me every day. It's not been an easy 15 months for her since she began full-time mold avoidance, but we are seeing her gradually winning the fight over mold toxicity. The first major milestone was when she called me and she said she'd just eaten an apple. Sorry. It was her first apple in 3 years. 15 months ago, she could only eat three things, and one of them was water. Today, she's able to eat anything she wants to. Her hair is growing, her fingernails are growing, and she's able to read again. Her extreme reactivity is beginning to diminish, and she's able to bounce back quicker from toxic hits. She's learned how to identify and decontaminate from toxins that her body reacts to, like in that hotel room. She knew when she walked in that it was bad, but she was willing to give it a try, hoping that she could be here today. These are what I call miracles. But for Angela, I know that these are the result of a lot of hard work and determination and study. This is something that it is just all consuming. And thankfully for this, Angela is not reinventing the wheel here. She's in good hands. She has the very wise and enthusiastic support of a whole community of motivators. Some have been at this for 40 years. Some have entire families who they're traveling with, who are all sick and reactive. Some, like Angela, are just out there on their own. I was absolutely shocked to learn that upwards of 100,000 people are in private social networks exclusively for mold sick people in mold avoidance. They come from all over the world to the United States seeking help. And this number is growing every day. They help each other. They ask advice from the ones who have healed and returned to active, normal life. These men and women are heroes in my book, and they have struggled to stay alive in a toxic world, thinking nothing of giving 10 to 12 hours every day free of charge to help anyone who needs their help and advice. I know for a fact that one of these people in particular literally saved my daughter's life on at least 2 occasions when he recognized from what she was telling him that she was in a very, very toxic environment that she was unfamiliar with. They are willing to answer their cell phones 24 hours a day. She's not met in person any one of these people, but they're always there for her help and for anyone else. These people are telling us that Angela is ahead of the curve. If she can just stick to it, she's going to come out of this living nightmare. It will not always be like this, they tell us. So a few months ago, when Angela started telling me stories of the people she is now helping, you can imagine how my heart swelled with pride to know that as bad as she feels, as lonely and isolating as her life is, she's willing to answer calls to help someone else who's desperate. I mean desperate for help. This is a source of great pride and frankly makes me very humble. Mold illness alone has not taught these people to set aside their own needs to help someone else. Angela certainly learned this type of selfless generosity from my dad, but also from you, members of the Rotary Club, who early on instilled in Angela a sense of wonder and oneness with places and people that were unfamiliar to her through her travels with the exchange program. Your commitment to serving other people and bringing people together by means of service made a very deep impression on Angela. She's become a frequent and respected contributor to the Q&A forums that mold avoiders use to share information. She set up a private Facebook group just for mothers and allies of mold avoiders so that she and I together could answer questions and find resources and information for people who struggle to support their loved ones in their mold illness. We share a long-term goal of one day creating a nonprofit organization that will offer assistance and advocacy for mold avoiders and others with toxic mold illness. We believe that education about toxic mold illness is the golden key to save lives. So I hope by now you're asking yourself a few questions. Is it possible my friend or loved one has been exposed to toxic mold? Have I been exposed? Is there anything I can do to help that person in my life who may be suffering from exposure to toxic mold? Is there anything that I can do to help Angela? Is there anything our chapter can do? Of course, the answer to every one of those questions is yes. And I'll just close with these few last comments. Please educate yourself on toxic mold and toxic mold illness. Please be open-minded to the person who exhibits or talks about sensitivities and physical or emotional reactions that are different from yours. Please do help Angela if you can. Financial assistance is the most immediate concern that I have. I've spent most of my adult life asking for help for nonprofits and charitable causes. Now I find myself asking for help for my daughter. If it weren't for the financial help of friends, we wouldn't have made it this far. I set up a GoFundMe account for Angela 9 months after she began her toxic mold avoidance journey. Since she left St. Louis over a year ago, Angela's been unable to work, so her sole financial support is from me and anyone else who's willing to donate help. But the GoFundMe account, if you'll go look at it, tells a fuller story of Angela's illness and her road to recovery. Granted, it was written 9 months ago and we're gradually updating it, but if you take a look at it, you'll get a much deeper understanding of what she's going through. But also, at the bottom of the story, we've included hyperlinks to important sources of information to help educate you and others about toxic mold illness. We had an original plan for the GoFundMe, which has changed many times. We've had to adapt, obviously, due to changing circumstances. But one of our primary goals and a high priority is still to purchase an off-road vehicle for Angela that she can live in. That's critical in mold avoidance. And we've been renting a SUV that she can stay in, but not live in very comfortably. Some people buy a used ambulance and retrofit that for their use. She's been scouring Craigslist for, gosh, months and months, looking at used car lots, and nothing has turned up so far. I'm sending letters to Mercedes-Benz and car manufacturers asking them to donate a new vehicle. So that's where I'm at. On average, it costs about $5,000 a month to cover all of Angela's expenses: rental vehicle, insurance, food, gasoline and car maintenance, blankets, clothing, and outdoor equipment for camping or indoor shelter in harsh weather months. Angela tent camps when the weather is conducive and sleeps in her car when it's too cold for tent camping. But she'll need to spend more nights in a hotel because of the sub-freezing temperatures and snow. We're facing much higher costs over the next 5 months of extreme winter weather, obviously. We're also seeking more opportunities to talk about Angela's story to increase awareness about toxic mold and toxic mold illness. You might be able to help us get the word out about this subject, or also to share her GoFundMe campaign with others. And lastly, one thing you can do is please share my pride in Angela, who has taken a horrible living nightmare of a situation and found out how to turn it into an avenue of service to other people. She brings a lot to the table: her friendship, her wisdom, her great communication skills, her empathy, her humor, her creativity, education, experience, intelligence. Nothing is held back from her encounters with people that she meets along the way. What happened to Angela is a tragedy, but she's turning it into an inspiring success story. And I truly believe that you all share in that. So if we have time, I'm very happy to take questions.
And anybody who has a question, I have muted everybody, so you'll have to unmute yourself. I think that will be the phrase for 2020. You need to unmute. I'm just throwing that out there.
I have a couple questions. First of all, Sue, that was an excellent presentation, and thanks for educating us on this, because I really didn't realize it was that serious of a problem. You said that the medical community does not recognize it as an illness. What's being done about that?
Oh, nothing. There's no research for this. And people who have been at this the longest, because toxic mold as a condition is growing exponentially, and it's largely due, I think, to unregulated chemicals and other toxins that are used in our just daily life. Perfume. There was a big article this week that I posted that was co-authored by Julie Raymeyer, who's a medical, no, she's a scientific writer who also is a victim of mold illness and was able to recover by using toxic mold avoidance. And she co-authored a paper that was published, I believe, Mitch, it was in the New York Times. Was it the New York Times? I can't remember. I posted it on Facebook. But there's just been no research on this. There's just not, there's not enough. I think there's probably statistically not a high enough incidence rate of verifiable mold illness in the country to justify uh, medical research turning its resources to this problem. And that's, I know that there's a golden number that you have to reach in terms of numbers of cases before people start throwing money at something. But we've seen this. Remember orphan diseases, that term they used to use all the time. There's plenty of evidence that this will become a verifiable bona fide thing. We've seen a real influx of functional medicine doctors and other medical doctors who are taking on mold illness as a specialty. And certainly the ISEAI is populated with a huge number of those doctors, both in the United States and across the globe. So I know that medicine is aware of this. There's a family in Illinois that I spoke to last year when Angela first embarked on mold avoidance, who told me about spending a full day with an MD in the Southwest who evaluated their son. And, he said, this is mold, and the only thing you can do is just get rid of every single thing you have and start fresh. And so I know that the medical community is aware of this. It's just not a big enough blip on the radar, for it to be in the popular discourse.
Thanks. And my other question is, you said that when you initially realized what her problem was, that she could go out to the desert and set up a tent and everything would be fine. Is there a better place in the country where she can locate to prevent the symptoms?
There's mold on the International Space Station. Mold is everywhere. And typically people congregate in the Southwest. That's where they go thinking that it's going to be the clearest. That has over the decades changed. And it's now much more difficult to find a clear place. And certainly this summer and fall with the fires, all of that smoke and ash and the flame retardant chemical that is used on national forests and state forests preemptively, all of those things combine to just make it one of the worst possible times to be out there looking for clear air. Angela was driving to escape smoke and fires. I was on the phone with my laptop trying to locate the location of those fires, tell her which direction to drive, which direction the smoke is going. She's literally having convulsions and holding onto the steering wheel of her car to try to just stay in place and drive this summer. It was very bad. The area that she located is kind of in a little donut hole in one of the northern states. And she's been there for, I'm going to say maybe a month now. And it's not too bad. There's indoor toxins and there's outdoor toxins. And she's dealing with both of them. So, it depends on the person, depends on what their level of toxicity is already, what they're reactive to, what's blowing through. Just all kinds of things. She can be in a great place and somebody drives up in an RV and she has got to leave immediately. That's it. So it's a crapshoot. Good question.
Sue, I know somewhere along the line I read something about like she's having to change blankets and things on a regular basis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's both sides of a double-edged sword. While Angela is, when she's in a clear place, her body is literally detoxing. This was one of the things that was kind of strange at first, but she discovered she is just one of hundreds of thousands of people who experiences this. In a clear place, she noticed that there was some kind of black gooey stuff coming out of her skin. And if she could get in some hot water and soak or take a hot shower bath, this black gooey stuff just kept coming out of her skin, out of her pores. And she's detoxing. She's literally detoxing and off gassing. And so, uh, the standard rule of thumb for people in mold avoidance is go to Walmart, buy the cheapest t-shirts that you can and wear them for a day and throw them away. A friend of hers has a storage locker that he goes to and he just keeps shipments of t-shirts. And so, he at any time he might have 2 dozen t-shirts in his car and he just wears it and throws it away because they're detoxing, their body is detoxing when they're in clear air. So it's the same for blankets, sleeping bags, tents, um, underclothes, whatever's touching their skin, she's detoxing in, and so she can't reuse them. Angela is very frugal and knows that we're on an extremely tight budget, so she tries to get 3 uses out of a blanket. And people tell her, "Don't do it, don't do it," but you do what you can. So that's why it's one reason why it's so expensive.
Wow.
And even sleeping in her car, she's off gassing in her car. This rental vehicle. And so, every few days she has to go into town, take everything out of the car, wipe everything down, decontaminate it, wipe the inside of the car down, outside, just completely clean it so that she can get back into it.
Unbelievable.
It is, especially when you don't feel good and you're by yourself. Very difficult, very challenging.
Keep
But
rolling.
she's smart and she knows this. And that's one of the reasons why Angela's going to succeed. She's got a mind like a steel trap, and her worst day is my best day. I always tell her that.
Anybody else? I did find that article on your Facebook page, Sue. It was the Washington Post.
Washington Post. The Julie Raymeyer co-authored.
Yeah. Which I can share. I'll share it on the Overland page. See it. Find it easily. Anybody else have any questions? We thank you so much for joining us, and
thank you.
You remain in our thoughts and prayers, and we'll share Angela's story and see what we can do, and reach out. Let us know if there's something in particular that we can do.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you again for all of the Rotary Club great input.
Thank you, Sue. Everybody have a good week. Next week is Bob Courtney is hosting program. Roger Drake, president of the Central Methodist University. Al Beinecke has a lady lined up for next week from the USO. And then we'll see what Brian and Ann have for the next 2 weeks. We will move for those that are joining after we had our guest speaker on, we decided to move the board meeting will be 1 week later, so it's not on election day. I, for one, will be out early trying to get voting, and Tom was, and so we're going to do that. a little bit of a discussion about trying to find a place that those that wanted to gather could do safely. So I'm going to be looking into the coffee shop at the Zion Lutheran Church in Maryland Heights, which I believe is the way they've got it set up right now. It's a very large room, small tables, 6 feet apart, so we could, you know, those that would want to, we could actually see each other again, face to face. So anyway, we'll be working on those things. Appreciate you joining us. Everybody have a great week. Anybody else have any other thoughts, comments? All right. Take care.
Y'all take care.
Yeah.